My name is Sheila Cook, and I'm with the British Isles hub known as 3LM, Land and Livestock Management for Life. And also part of our hub is Marianne Hill in the back, who's on a farm in Oxfordshire. My husband, Christopher Cook, and Caroline Grindrod is our first accredited professional and working on her own practice of holistic management called Wilderculture here in Cumbria. And we're delighted to have you. We've got people from all over. We've got people from locally here, and we've got people from Norway and Wales in the back, Durham and Shropshire. We've got someone still coming yet from Scotland. So we're glad to have you here from far and wide. Byron comes here from Colorado in the U.S., and he is the program director, senior program director at Savory Institute. And I call him the master trainer of holistic management. Christopher and I received our training in holistic management from Byron in 2015. And I tell you, it was the best training I've received in my life. And that's what we told you when we were done. It's so masterful what Byron does, translating this massive big work of Allan's Savory into bite-sized nuggets that we can understand. And Byron did this fantastic talk in San Francisco at the Global Savory Conference in 2015, and I've asked him to replay that for us tonight. And it will come at you in a rush, but just take it all in and just let it soak in and permeate. And then we'll have time at the end for about a half an hour for questions. So save up your juicy questions. So without further ado, I want to turn it right over to Byron. And let's give him a round of applause to welcome him.
It's nice when I get the applause up front because you may all be gone time we get to the end. And I think she doesn't know many trainers or has had a poor education. So I'll try not to move around too much because he's trying to film, but also so that you guys can still see past me and see what's important there. Well, I really do welcome you here. I'm happy to be here to support these guys. Holistic management with Allan Savory's been around for about 50 years. The first 30 or so before that, he was putting all the pieces together, and the last 30 or so it really came together. It still may improve from here, but we've got something that works. The only point was we couldn't get it out to enough people. And so before it was people like Caroline or myself or Ulf out there teaching, trying to do our own little business, and it was difficult. So the whole business model we're using now is to help people that want to start a for-profit or a non-profit regional training center, essentially. And that's what Christopher and Sheila have done, so that they have local people that can follow up and just provide training and expertise, and then our job is just to support that. So that's in a nutshell that network that you were talking about, trying to leverage this information and get it out to more people who are receptive. Have you ever wished, this says, that you could have lived at a point in time when great change occurred and maybe been a part of that? Well, you can think about, there's examples up there about major events that came along in history that really changed the world. We may be coming into another one here. Most of these, though, involve technology and technological advances. And we're really dealing with the land, which is very complex, and people, which is complex, and the economy, which is really complex. You're dealing with all three of those in land management. As we move forward, we're living at a time where some things have come together, some understanding and some knowledge of how to manage land. You ever think about how many civilizations we've had come and go? It's over 20 that have been documented. Jared Diamond in his book Collapse and a few others have really said they came and they went and they're gone. Did you ever think about it, that they were all organic? Doesn't mean organic isn't bad at all, but it's not enough. they all still ruined their soil and their water base to where they couldn't produce food and they had to move. Civilization collapsed. So what can we do to help move forward? Knowledge has increased and converged, and we can make positive steps to move forward, both related to food security, but also to resource management. I was teaching high school agriculture when I ran into Allan's work, and I realized I had lots of pieces and parts, but no real way to put it together. And I also was missing some key environmental insights of how the land works. When it all came together and you had a framework, that's when things got exciting, and that's when I started seeing more results on the land. Right now, we're not seeing results on the land in a lot of places of the world. Everything circled up there in red is where it's got extremely deteriorating soils, more floods, more desertification. And the parts of the world that are left are going to need to feed the world, and actually they're not in perfect shape and not up to what they could produce. There is so much potential and so much need. And if you look at the soils map there of degrading soils, that does include some of British Isles, southern England here also. Where I live, in parts of our country, there was topsoil this deep, but in 150 years, it's half gone. And that we've got to be building soil. It says right there, a quote from Allan, that ultimately the only wealth that can sustain any community, economy, or nation is derived from the photosynthetic process, which is green plants growing on regenerating soil, not degenerating soil. We've got to be building it at the same time. So think of the soil as like the savings account, the bank account, the principal. And what we're taking off is the interest. And we can continue to take it off, but we can't go into the principal. Or if we do at times, we need to know it and then build it back at times, instead of just continually take it away. So we've got a big job ahead of us. And so I put here, what if today you can be part of bringing great positive change? Things I've run into, I wouldn't be in front of you if I didn't see them work on the land and think they work. You need to be willing, though, to do a couple things. Learn environmental insights that, when used together, can improve food production while improving resources. We'll cover tonight 3 environmental insights that you've got to understand if you're managing land to truly be moving it forward. You've got to learn to speak land. Martin, do you speak dog? Caroline, do you speak horse? I mean, I think if you think about it, if you go to any country in the world, you can get off the plane and you might not be able to talk to the people, but you could talk to their dog, couldn't you? You can learn, you can relate. We need to learn to speak land. And then there's some key principles when you understand it. You can speak land, you can understand land wherever you go. And all of you have had some exposure to holistic management, some more. Those of you who've had a little more, that whole concept of brittleness and understanding probable results when I use tools on the land, that's the same wherever you go in the world if you can understand that. So that's one of the things we have to do. But then we've also got to learn to picture and think about the whole ball of wax at once. We're pretty good at reducing things in reductionist science and reductionist management to one thing at a time. We've really got to look at the whole thing, the people, the land, and the money involved simultaneously. And that's where the word holism or holistic comes from, is simply looking at the whole picture. So imagine being able to really make a positive contribution. And you're doing that not selfishly, because it means you're also improving land. You're becoming more productive. You're helping others become more productive. And it's not this degenerating cycle of just more inputs that are so expensive and not sustainable, hard to do. We don't want to become like this Bedouin families in Kuwait. They're still there with their herds. They're grazing right there. That's where they set up camp for a week. And I look and say, where is there even anything to eat? And there's little remnants of grass. We need to be able to help that. Or here, this could be Argentina, this could be half of western United States. We need to not be desertifying and losing plants and then soil and then water. We need to not be like the non-brittle or regular rainfall areas of the world. This could be Great Britain, but this is eastern United States and Virginia. Look at the creek and what it's telling you. Even though the hillsides all have plants on them, look at the erosion going on. So it may not be cutting quite as much on its way to the creek, but it's still moving, and when it gets there, it's cutting and taking away soil. It's not what we want. Our management truly does affect what we do. Management here caused that line. It's management. Do we know what's causing one side versus the other? Do we know what we want to create? Do we know that we can create, and that as opposed to just see what happens? So really one of the key points here is soil needs to be holding carbon and water, along with many other nutrients. If instead we're putting all the water and the carbon up, then we're taking away the ability of our soil to be living and provide life. Then whether we raise livestock or crops or do recreation or ag tourism on it, we don't even have those options when we lose the ability of the whole soil to survive and be a living soil. A couple examples here. This was in a very seasonal rainfall area. So it came part of the year and it's dry a long part of the year. This was in Mexico, 1960s. See the hill in the background? It's behind that tree today. You live in an area where it doesn't need to take you 30 years to change something like that. You can do it a lot quicker because you've got a little more rainfall, but more importantly, it's more regular throughout the year and from year to year. We're finding that's really important. A couple other examples here. This is in Africa, in Zimbabwe, in a more seasonal rainfall area. However, high rainfall. Roots of the trees, another root of a tree, when managed properly. Doesn't need to be bare. We should have flowing water. We shouldn't have rain and then floods followed by it's a drought. We should have rain fall and soak in and come out slowly in springs and rivers to have that water cycle working. You know, they say the water cycle comes off the ocean, comes over land, falls, and goes back. Well, the piece we can do something about is right when it hits the ground. When it hits, was our land ready to receive it? Was the water going to be used effectively so it could soak in and transpire through plants? Is the ground covered so it doesn't just soak in and then evaporate and gone away? Might as well not have rained. Or does it hit and run off so it might as well not have rained? You know, if you get a good 1-inch rain or a good 25 millimeters, did you use it today? Or did you let half of it go? Were you ready? So we want to see places that truly make use of the ecosystem functioning. So how do we do this regeneration of landscape, which would then affect people's lives and their finances? How do we do that? Well, in the next little bit, I'm going to tell you a little bit about holistic management. I will give you a good overview. I think it's only fair to let you see all sides of it instead of just talk in depth about a piece of it. But it won't be it won't be details. Later we can ask some questions and there will be some, but I will give you some meat, not just the sizzle. We'll get into some of it, okay? It may expose you to new thought, and it may challenge some traditional thinking or some ways that you've pictured something to be. That's okay. And I really want to spur your interest in learning more, no matter what angle you're coming from. Does that sound fair? So I can leave you hanging a little at the end? All right. So as I said, I was just in traditional agriculture when I ran into Allan's work, and it made sense to me. So Allan discovered a few things, and then he added a couple more to it, and it finally got to where in the mid-'80s he had a management framework that worked. You ready to walk through it? Let's start with this. I'll tell you just a little bit more. My position now is I work full-time for Savory Institute, and I work with hubs and training folks in holistic management, and then I do consulting projects that we keep at the headquarters level. We're very small. We usually farm things out to hubs, but once in a while I do that. So it's been eye-opening for me and an opportunity to travel more of the world than just the United States. And so it truly is what I just told you. It's the land and people are the same everywhere, same challenges, same problems, but the same answers to fix it. And it's usually the people that have to learn and be open to some new thought to change things that slows it up more than it is the ability to fix the land, truly. I told you there were 3 environmental concepts that I wanted you to, or said you're going to have to learn. Well, let's talk about them. So here's one, and I've mentioned this word a couple times tonight, brittleness. It has to do with regularity of moisture. You know, if you go caving underground, it's cool no matter what time of year, and it's usually a little moist. But from the ground level up, that's where it matters. Do we have regularity of moisture? Well, why does that matter? Why do we need regularity of moisture? Why do we need humidity above ground? Have you ever heard a farmer say, I know I want more rain all the time, but he's thinking about it to grow more? Have you ever heard one say, I would like more humidity, more regular humidity, so that decay can occur? It's a cycle, just like water cycles. Nutrients grow and they need to decay. Brittleness, this concept of, is the regular moisture regular enough so that microorganisms can live and it can decay, is critical. As you walk or travel around the world, green forage is this year's. Brown is usually, it's hard to read that on there. Up top it says green is this year's growth. In the middle it says if you see some leaf material that's brown or tan of some color, it's usually a year or 2 years old at the most, and it's decayed. But if it stands there a long time, it turns gray and oxidizes into the air, so it rusts and goes away. You don't have that here because you've got enough regular moisture that all the microbes that truly eat that plant material, pull it to the soil surface or pull it underground, they can live year-round or a lot of the year, and so plants grow and the decay process happens. This is what we call a non-brittle environment. It's regular moisture year-round. It could be low. Work I did in Denmark, they only get 20 inches or 800 millimeters a year. But it's so regular that it's very non-brittle, we call it. Anytime you pick up a twig or something, it won't snap. It's literally not brittle. It'll just bend. There's not any gray material here. In other parts of the world, you have this oxidizing material. You grow a plant and it's actually there long enough it rusts into the air. Let me ask this question. Where is the regular moisture above ground in this non-brittle environment? So I've explained that non-brittle means there is regular humidity all the time throughout the year. So in this picture, where is that regular moisture? It's in the humidity in the air, correct? If I show you a picture like this, which is not Europe, or not this part of Europe, this is a very seasonal rainfall area. If plants need moisture to decay, where is the regular moisture in this picture above ground? Carolyn knows. Caroline?
In the gut of the animal.
It's in the gut of the animal. What you're looking at there, and that's the American West with some bison. The only way plants can decay there is they've got to run through the gut of the animal, through their stomach, through the rumen. In a ruminant, the first part of the ruminant is the rumen full of all the microbes that live year-round. You're looking at not an animal, you're looking at a mobile fermentation vat that walks all over the place and runs food material through it to decay it. And the microbes in the stomach are what really eat the leaf material. That buffalo couldn't live on that any more than you or I. Same with your cows and sheep. They are ruminants. It's their microbes in their stomach that are truly digesting the food. Now, let's tie that to you all, because you don't live here in an area that has seasonal rainfall. It matters hugely. You are on this, there's a scale, you're more toward this end. If we drew a line in the middle, you lean this way toward regular moisture versus where I live, it's the other way. 2/3 of the Earth's surface is that way. Only 1/3 of the Earth's surface is this way. Animals, ruminants, are required on that side of the scale to make the ecosystem work, to make it function. But On the non-brittle side, they are truly enhancing to maintain pastures. Pastures maintained with properly managed animals with the ruminant will make your pasture more healthy, more thick, if that's the state you want it to manage. We were talking today, if you want to create a forest, that's different. But here, if you want to hold forest back, you would use some kind of livestock, and that livestock can truly make that pasture be better than it would be without the animal or resting it. That was one principle. It truly applies even in these areas where you have regular moisture. The second part of that was predators kept those animals bunched and moving so that land got time to recover. Manure got spread more evenly over the land. The grasslands of the world are the most productive soils in the world. That's why most of them have been torn up today and put into cropland. They were initially grasslands. Grasslands store all this material in living soil. You know, it's all below in the ground. Forests are good too, but they store it above ground, not as much as a really fertile grassland, and then it all has to fall over and rot or it goes back to the air again. This living soil keeps up just as much carbon sequestration or healthy soil production from a grassland as from anywhere. But we've got to have animals on them to enhance that soil with predators moving them. And that even enhances across that whole brittleness scale your pasture land. Allan Savory started off as a wildlife biologist who hated livestock. And then he came to see they needed to be there because we didn't have enough wildlife or predators left to maintain soils. So we're using domesticated livestock to maintain soils. We have a hub in Kenya, just on the north end of the Mara there, on the Masai Mara. So the big herds come up from Tanzania to Kenya and go back. Probably the biggest remaining real wildlife grassland ecosystem with wildlife and predators. When you go there, it's got half of the land, or probably a third of the land, that's full of rank old grass. It's high rainfall, so it can grow a lot. But it's brittle. It's very seasonal in the rainfall, and so it can't decay. It can only decay by going through the gut of the animal. There are not enough wildlife to eat all that it grows. So the wildlife concentrate on the areas they've kept fresh every year, leave these other areas alone, so they become more and more over-rested. And we are using cattle to help freshen up more of the range, to help have more wildlife actually in that area of the land. And it's just mimicking nature, just to make it work better. Anyway, Allan, he really put together the concept of brittleness, and he also recognized the predator-prey relationship that many civilizations had thought of, but he brought those two together. But it still wasn't enough to fix the land, because he grew up in Zimbabwe, and he was seeing rivers that were flowing as a child dry up as an adult, and not knowing why. And in his TED Talk, he says one of the reasons he felt was there was too many wildlife. And so he was helping the campaigns to eliminate and kill elephant and everything else to let the land have enough time to recover. And it turned out, he said, I was wrong. We need the wildlife there with their predator to truly make the land come forward. It wasn't until he went to France, though, and started really studying that he found timing was important. Now let's talk about timing here for a minute. This plant on the left, every time it was clipped off at the height it's at, and every time it even grew a little bit, it was clipped. It was just kept there. And see the corresponding roots. This next one over, it was clipped off the same as the first plant, but then each time it was allowed to grow about that much. And as soon as it did, it was clipped back to the one on the left. And see its corresponding roots. Same thing with the third one and with the fourth one. Each time they regrew to those levels you see them at, they were cut back. Well, look at the roots on this one on the right. That plant, the leaves are fully regrown. It's trying to put up a few reproductive stalks. It's truly recovered its leaf blades, which means it's recovered its root. And that's what we need to happen each time. We can't see the root, so we look at the leaf blades to tell. If you mow a lawn too often and keep it too short, You wonder why the weeds are coming in. You're not letting the plants recover. They can't put any root down. It's the same principle. Timing. Let's just talk for a minute about timing of grazing. And whenever an animal comes in, you're using or managing the tool of grazing and also the tool of animal impact. Do you have to worry about it with horses? Sure. That plant needs to recover. Doesn't matter who grazed it. How about with pigs? If you've got them on a permanent pasture that you want to regrow, you've got to allow for recovery of the plants. If it's a planted pasture for them to go root and dig up tubers, well, that's different. But it doesn't matter if it's poultry, and this is one of our big challenges with us now truly doing on-range poultry more. And by the way, I'm trying to go slow enough. I've got a lot to cover, but I know I don't speak English correctly, and Ulf from Norway doesn't either, so we've got 3 Englishes coming from different ways here. We'll fight about which one's right later. Poultry are very hard to move. There's so much infrastructure that sometimes what we're doing is getting the animal impact and saying, okay, they're going to overgraze because they're staying too long. Plant grows, it means if its leaf blades are back, it means its roots are back. It gets bitten, it sacrifices some roots. Once it starts to regrow, you need to go away until the leaves are back, because that tells you the roots are back. That's the planned grazing that we manage on this chart, along with many other factors. So that's a key, timing. And it doesn't matter what animal here, whether it's this lawn up front mowed, or behind the fence, whether it's those veal calves, or the cattle just left this pasture and the farmer didn't like what was left sticking up, the weeds that were still there and the plants they didn't eat, so he'd mow it. Clip it off just to make it look good, let it all come back fresh. If he doesn't do that the day those animals leave and it starts to regrow and he goes in with the mower, he just overgrazed every plant in that pasture. If you now really think about overgrazing as the way I've been describing it, if you just take a plant short, that's overused. And it'll take longer to come back. We don't usually like to do that, but it'll come back. We go away until it regrows. It's if it's eaten whatever height and then it's trying to regrow, we need to be gone. If it's slow growth and dry and it's not growing, we need to stay. So anyway, the concept of timing. And if you don't get it all or didn't sink in, that's good. It didn't with me. In fact, it took me a while. But the point was I wanted you to really understand that concept. So let me ask you this question. How soon does it take for a plant to begin to regrow after it's been grazed? Well, let me add a little information to it. Let's say it has good moisture and good temperature, good sunshine. How soon can a plant start to regrow? 3 days? Immediately in some cases. Some of those annual sorghum Sudans, you can almost hear them growing in the summer. Corn at night on a hot July night in Iowa, you can hear it growing. So if it's coming that soon, with adequate sunshine and moisture, that would typically mean we need to leave if it's regrowing, or we would be starting to overgraze individual plants. How long does it take a plant to fully recover? It does depend. It could be, let's say you had the best, let's say it's a perennial pasture of grasses and forbs and legumes, clovers, and you've got good sunshine and good moisture. If it was eaten down so much, half or more, how long would it take to regrow its leaf blades? Yeah, and maybe at the best 35 or 30, but your job is to watch. And you're moving animals based on plant regrowth speed. You're not moving animals based on how much is left. Otherwise, you're ignoring this whole principle of timing. Could take 3 weeks, 4 weeks to over a year. Let me ask you this question. If grass or forage is growing fast, A, livestock must be moved sooner, or they may stay longer. Oh, I'm not explaining anything. I just, A or B, you, come on. If plants are growing fast, livestock must be moved sooner. Correct. based on what I was just saying the last 5 minutes, right? Because it's starting to regrow. Well, if I stay and everything's starting to regrow and I'm rebiting a plant, it didn't get its roots back. Now it's got to get more root up. And if I keep doing that, it'll be that plant that was on the left a few slides ago. It can never develop root because I'm just clipping it every time. So can it get through a drought or a dry period as well? No, it has no root to even reach moisture. So just a concept I wanted to throw at you. What about then if grass or forage is growing slow? Livestock must stay longer, or livestock may be moved. It's growing slow. No, it's A again. If it's growing slow, they need to stay longer. And if you say, well, I don't have enough grass, well then you're overstocked, at least for right now, for that pasture, that paddock for this part of the growing season. So stocking rate, how many animals are on the land, may be too high. Because if it's growing slow, you need to slow down. Because where you're going isn't ready. It's growing slow too. So if you don't remember the whys and whats, just remember fast and fast go together. Fast growth means I've got to move a little quicker. Slower growth means I need to move slower. That's this concept of timing that André Voisin discovered back in France in the 1950s that Allan brought into holistic management. Plants that are continually eaten, and they can't go up, they'll start to go sideways. They say, I'm not going up, I'll get bit, so I'm going that way. So we've covered some of that, and I'm going to go to, when is a perennial plant recovered? When it looks like an ungrazed plant, when it's fully recovered. So our job in managing grazing is trying to almost always let plants recover. And the planning procedure helps us do that because there's too many things to think of at once. So on this chart goes down all the things we have to remember, and the last thing that goes in there is the livestock moves. And then there's our plan. That's in the winter, we do our plan. Then maybe come summer, we're operating it, and we adjust based on plant regrowth speed of how long we stay. But we've got a plan. It's just like a coach, at a game. In any sport, comes in with a plan, but he doesn't stick with it. He's changing it constantly then. But if you don't even come in with a plan, you have a very slim chance of winning. So let me ask you this. Are these plants recovered? Would you turn animals out onto that based on what I've said? You should have leaf blades back. No. Do you ever turn out onto something like that any time of the year?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, we all do. And when would be a time we just have to? Spring. Where are you going to go in the spring? You stay off the field in a sacrificial paddock or in a barn, and you wait until the first place you go has the leaves regrown. Well, what has everything else done? It's way too mature. So we turn out. We should let it get a little head start. And hopefully we turn out each spring in a spot we didn't last spring. We break habits and routines because think about it, until you move into a paddock where you're finally going into one in the later spring that's got the leaf blades back, every paddock up till that point you've overgrazed plants. And you have to. So that's why next spring we try to go somewhere else. That's what nature did. So a couple photos here on recovery. The place on the left just got grazed, the one on the right actually is recovered for that area and what it could do. In this, would you turn out there? Is that ready? Well, a few of these are getting close. What about these species and those species and these? It's not ready yet. You'll be, maybe some are recovered and most of the others aren't. So they're overgrazed and you wonder, well, why are they disappearing? Why did my mix I planted of 5 seeds, is it going to 3 or 2? Or vice versa, I didn't plant anything, or I planted 2 and now I've got 15 through proper management by allowing some recovery. That one recovered? Oh yeah, it's gone to seed. I mean, it's done all it's going to do. So just a little bit of concepts there. Spent a little bit on here on brittleness and a little bit on timing. So just for example, here's some cattle on a stream bank. Does that raise any red flags right there? Some places they don't like to see that, some places it's actually illegal. Well, it's because we let animals hang there and cause damage. Well, we go into a stream, we grazed it off, we actually had, go to the next one, look at the erosion on that bank that's happening. One of the reasons we wanted them in there, and we took it pretty hard, was to get animal impact, to get these straight sides more sloped so plants could establish and reestablish on there and stop some of the erosion. Anyway, you can see that's May, no, that's April. That's where I took the next couple of pictures from. Here's June, so that's 2 months recovery. It wasn't ready yet, so we let it go 3 months. Now we've got some plants going to seed. We're managing to create a landscape. So just the thought, remember you're feeding microorganisms. Even in the non-brittle environments, you're feeding the microbes in the rumen of the animal, maybe half of the feed. And if there's a saying, take half, leave half. Well, whether it's half or more, it's hard to tell an animal to only eat half of a plant. She might eat 2/3 of this one and hardly any of that one. But overall, we need to leave enough to feed the ground. We need to cover the ground. We need to have a skin on it. It needs to have cover so that the water cycle can work from that litter, that plant litter, down into the ground. And we need to leave enough to feed the microbes in the ground. It's not wasted. If we take it all through the livestock or take it all through haying, we've mined the soil. We've got to put it back somehow. So you're feeding microorganisms. Andre Voisin wrote the book Grass Productivity, based in France. Timing. So I've given you 3 environmental principles: brittleness, or regularity of moisture; the predator-prey relationship, how the predator caused the prey to move for health of the soil; and 3, timing, or recovery of plants after grazing. There's another one here called holism. Allan felt he still was not having land improve, even with the 3 environmental principles, until he put this piece together. And it's simply, you've got to look at the whole picture and you've got to keep the whole thing in mind when you make choices. And you can't be reductionist in your management any more than our reductionist science helps us study things that maybe aren't even valid. We need to look at the more whole view to know what to study and research. So let me talk about that here briefly. This phone is very complicated, or any of this technology up here. And if one thing in this phone stops working, usually the phone quits. Okay? And this is saying at each decision point there's fewer decisions, but there's definite answers. It's very complicated, but it's not all that complex. And so it's a very linear reasoning process. This leads to that, to this, and that's the option if it doesn't work. We are very good at things we make, using the hard sciences of math and physics to go to the moon, to build this computer. That's complicated management and making complicated decisions. Complex is the other angle here. At every decision point, there could be multiple ways and multiple results, and no matter what choice you make, it keeps going. It does not stop. When you're driving your car and the electrical system quits, you stop. It doesn't decide to keep going and go that way, and you're hanging onto the wheel and trying to say, no, look, your electric's broken, you need to stop. It stops. But with things that are complex, it keeps going. It's self-organizing. Examples are, well, I'll get to them in a minute, a great need in complex situations for a holistic reasoning process. These are the soft sciences. If you're managing soft sciences, you're managing complexity. Soft sciences include agriculture, managing the environment, economics. How about people relationships? So you think managing a farm is not up to equality of any other job out there? You're managing 3 soft sciences that all keep going and self-organize. We've put a man on the moon, and we still have eroding creeks right here. So this is not rocket science, what you've chosen to do. It's actually harder. Isn't it? So many people through history thought about things in the whole picture like that. Allan, being from Zimbabwe, studied Jan Smuts, who was president of South Africa at one point, and he wrote a book in the 20s on how to really look at the holism piece of things. And that's when he realized, I'm not getting the people involved, we're not learning how to make decisions better, we're not bringing in finances. All we've been trying to do is fix the environment, and it doesn't work by itself, at least only short term. When that all came together about the mid-1980s, that's when things really started going forward. So by that time, he knew, up top here, nature functions in wholes, but so do people and relationships and money. It's all together. Plus, brittleness, predator-prey connection, and timing. Those three environmental principles really gave a real kick to management in complex situations, to finally being able to get some results. Everybody with me so far? Let's change gears just a little bit. What we're managing with the land is the ecosystem processes. You could bring me a book, big book on zoology or botany or biology, and I could learn a lot of details. But for managing the land and looking at the land, I need to learn to read the soil surface, because right at the surface of the soil is when you see the earliest changes, the earliest warning signs that tell you, if you keep doing this, you're going to have this all be brush in 5 years. Okay, I'm trying to create brush in this pasture. Great, then do what you're doing. But if you're not, then what do I change? So we need to learn to read the ecosystem processes, and we do it through 4 things. Water cycle. Is water soaking in or running off? The mineral cycle. Are plants growing and decaying? The energy flow. Are we capturing the sunlight and using it? Or is most of it hitting bare ground or small plants and it's not being used? Or are most of our plants always so short they can't use the sun? Or are most of them gone to seed all the time where they're not using the sun? And community dynamics is the name for it. But what are the plant and animal communities we have? Are they what we want? Are they complex? So let's run through a little bit on each of these things. Learning to read the land. Water cycle. If you were a raindrop here, you might do pretty good. You'd soak in versus getting to be a little bit of bare ground there. Here we've got evidence of an ineffective water cycle, even with all that grass. You've seen that picture before. Looking straight down, if I hit the land there versus if I'm a raindrop and I hit it there, or there, or there, we need to cover the ground to have an effective water cycle. Mineral cycle, plants growing and decaying, are always seen as green and tan because things are moving through the decay process, or is there evidence of gray or almost a dark color, whether it's leaf blades, manure, pine needles, sticks. Are they oxidizing up or chemically, or are they biologically decaying down? So we learn to look for that. So far it's leaning toward non-brittle. It tells us very clearly we've got regular humidity year-round. This is in a very humid area with non-seasonal rainfall, and on some of the south-facing hillsides it looks like that. Let the land tell you, oh, we could improve the mineral cycling here. And as you get to the more seasonal rainfall areas, you see more and more gray material that's oxidizing up into the air. So much so the plants die from the middle out. Because the old material in there, the water can get in there, but the sunlight can't. So they die, and they only grow around the edges. You don't have to travel far to move into more brittle leaning areas in either France or Spain. Either way. We look at energy flow, capturing the sunlight. Is that field capturing a lot of sun? Yeah, it is. It truly is. What about this one? As much? No, the plant density isn't there. There's a good plant, but there's a bare spot, could have another plant, then there's another plant. That bare spot, at least here, it's pretty well covered with plant litter, but wouldn't we rather have another plant in there if we could? How about here? Are we capturing sunlight? Has it gone to seed a lot? So it's probably shutting down. Maybe it's pumping some food to the root still, but it's slowing down. So it would be like a switch on the wall, a rheostat that would turn these lights up or down, a dimmer switch. In this photo, where plants they grow slow when they're really short, then they grow fast, and then as they go to seed, they grow slow again. So this is dimming down. Now that's fine if we have a reason. We wanted it to go to seed, we wanted to plant seed naturally there. We want to create a lot of litter, we're going to put it up for hay. But we need to recognize that's not, if that's what most of our farm's doing all summer, we're not using half the sunlight, just like we're not using half the water. So we're learning to read the ecosystem so that then we can know, are we creating what we want? So energy flow here, examples of the less you've got covering the ground, the more is bouncing off. It's like walking across the tennis court and it's hot, and you walk to the grass and it's cool. It's absorbing the grasses, and the tennis court was just bouncing it all back. Water cycle, mineral cycle, energy flow. The fourth ecosystem process is what are the plant and animal communities doing? So just a variety of photos here to have us start learning to observe. Here's a little fence line with, it's different on each side. On the right, there's a lot more green plants. On the left, there's a lot more weeds. They've gone to seed. We need to start asking, well, why? And that's probably our management. Wouldn't be a soil difference usually just on a straight fence line. Why are there this many weeds in this pasture? And actually, are there more there than there used to be, or are they declining because the grass is competing? We don't know from one photo here, but we need to learn to see what we're seeing. Are we seeing forbs and grasses and clovers? Are we seeing young trees come in or brush come in? How about in a little corral, a little pen that's only used once a year, but it's so abused with animal impact it takes it back to dirt, and all of a sudden it comes up to all these broadleaves. Does that tell us what it could be doing outside if we had a little more impact? But not as often as this, which keeps it in weeds. This needs to be allowed for recovery in between to allow it to change to a more higher level of succession of perennial plants that are desired versus the lower perennials that come in first that maybe are not desired. Why do we have clovers and we wanted more grass? Is it because we keep taking it down too short on the grass and that allows the clovers to come in? Could be. And yes, we did because we wanted more clovers. Okay, but did we know what we're doing? Are we trying to do that? Monocultures. This is a crop field actually, but monocultures, are we seeing that our pastures are going to monocultures? Do they have as much species, as many as they could? How about potential? We thought we had big trees on this farm until we found this one. What is the potential, whether it's grass or trees? You know, that little grass plant that's continually been grazed so it isn't much, now we start rotating, so we go away and let it recover once. It's only going to get so big and go to seed because it only had so much root. So once it's gone to seed, we can graze it again. We're starting to go to seed. And maybe the next time, if we let it fully recover, it gets more root in, it gets bigger and broader leaves. Each time, it's like a plant fitness program at the gym. Until it gets up to, after 6 or 8 grazings and full recoveries, its capacity of what it can do. Even with trees like that, we many times don't know how big they could be. Are we seeing forbs, shrubs, trees, grasses? They say we like to really see the variety of things as humans. But what are we wanting to create, and what are we doing to manage to get that plant and animal communities we want to? So we really study right at the soil surface to tell us which direction we're going. Distance to the nearest plant, what is the nearest perennial plant, what is its age, how healthy is it overgrazed, overrested? We need to know those things. Do we have a lot of moss in a non-brittle area? We don't go to bare ground. There's regular rainfall all the time, and even abused ground doesn't usually turn bare and erode away. It gets covered, instead of by a hard lichen or algae, it gets covered by a moss. And it's just a good word to use today is stagnant. It's just there. But that's the equivalent here of bare ground, say in Colorado. It's not up to its potential, and many times rain will hit and run under that and run off without taking as much dirt, but you've lost the water. hence the big eroding valley in the bottom when the hillside still looked so green. We lost water. With animals, this is some heritage ancient white parks, but are we trying to get a variety of animals, whether they're domesticated or wild, to just help with the diversity to make everything function? And that depends on what you're trying to create. Are we seeing all kinds of plants, trees, shrubs, grasses, and forbs? And if not, if we're just wanting a pasture, all right, are we seeing a diversity of grasses in there, a diversity of forbs, including legumes? So we measure those things. Are we seeing the banks collapse, which gave great trout habitat here on this ranch? They loved those banks collapsing because the fish got bigger underneath. But the problem was, it's supposed to be a bank like this that's stable, not eroding, with shrubs on the side that give the same protection for the fish to be under. What are we creating, and how and why? That's what we are trying to learn and read when we learn to read the ecosystem. What's wrong with this forest here? There's a lot of good healthy trees, but what's one thing that's not there?
Young trees.
Yeah, where's the baby trees? Where's the teenager trees? Unless you're raising that on purpose as a monoculture for logging, if that's trying to really create a habitat that's diverse, where are the ages? Same with grasses. All we have is 80%, 90% new plants? Shouldn't we be seeing at least 2 or 3% of seedlings every year? Or are we seeing plants die off? So I was driving along in California and saw this sign. Drifting sand, subject to flooding. Pretty flat road. Little hill out in here. What's happening?
Desertification.
Think about the water cycle. It isn't. When it rains, what happens? It's hitting hard capped bare ground and running away. Or if it's slow enough that it can go down in, it's evaporating back out. So they're probably wanting some rain, but when it comes, it'll go away. It might as well not have rained. They're not prepared for it. So when it comes, it floods, and when it's between rains, it just dries out and you got blowing sand. It's a broken water cycle on that little piece we can manage where it hits the ground. So what we should be doing is managing land to accept the rain, be ready for it when it comes. Not say, I wish it would come, and when it comes, not be ready and then complain. We've got it backwards that way. Managing land. Tools. There's only so many things we can use on the ground to manage land. So this is a picture down here on the right of fire. We can use fire. Here's a picture of letting the organisms that live on their own. We just try to create habitat for them. In this case, beaver. Do we want more beaver to hold back more water, or less to hold back less water? It could be either, depends on your situation. But are we either managing habitat for more of them or managing habitat for less? Up here, rest. We don't do anything to land. No disturbance from fire, no disturbance from technology, no disturbance from any large animals. Rest, leave it alone. That's a tool. It's a very popular tool. Let land be alone. Let it go to nature. It'll be fine, just fine. Well, you already know if it's non-brittle with regular rainfall, that means it will cover over and maybe move higher in succession. And if that's just fine, then that's correct, if that's what you want. If it's seasonal rainfall and you disturb the ground and leave it with rest, it may just sit there and stay as bare ground for a long time. It needs it needs disturbance, usually of animal impact or technology, to move it forward, to create the conditions for seeds to establish. I missed this one down here. This is some fencing supplies, but it's representing technology. Everything from irrigation to genetics to plant breeding to this fencing equipment to tractors. This is all technology. We are good at that, developing it and using it. That's a tool. Technology, fire, rest, letting living organisms that can do their own thing do it. The two tools we usually leave out of the toolbox are those two under the heading of living organisms: grazing and animal impact. We bring an animal in there, managed wrong, they will destroy land. Managed correctly, they will build soil and build land. It's not the animal's fault. it's the management. So we're just simply trying to make that tool, bringing in an animal, proper or better, and have that in our toolbox along with everything else there. Everything's able to be used. You choose what's you're gonna use that fits your financial plan to take you and your land and family where you need to go. That's your choice. But we need to learn to use the tools properly, use them all, and learn the probable results that will occur based on our brittleness in our area, our regular rainfall. Amount is important, but not as important as regularity, to be able to create the landscape we want. So managing tools, and they're all done, that up here says, with our creativity or labor. That makes a big difference in how successful it is, and they should be taken within a context. You should be really clear, this is what I want to create, and therefore will these actions take me there. We're going to race through these. Money and labor is almost always required, along with our creativity. Technology, the most used tool, in a lot of different forms, and it's great. We use it in a lot of ways. Fire, it's a really old tool. Problem with fire many times is it puts what you had and grew in the air, so it mined your soil. This was a cool fire. Once we drove over it, the tips broke off and hadn't even burned to the ground. But a really hot fire can seal the surface of the soil. There are uses for fire, but if it's continually used, that wasn't what nature did to get rid of old growth. If you Google fires in Africa, the whole continent's usually on fire because they have seasonal rainfall, but quite a bit of rainfall that grows tall grass. So tall grass prairie, but with seasonal moisture, it grows, and for next season, it can't decay. There's not enough animals. It's got to be gone by next year or nothing new grows, so they burn it. Same thing in eastern Kansas in the United States. Well, how are we using fire? And it does have beneficial uses, but many times we're not using it in the right way. So anyway, fire is a tool we need to be aware of. Rest. No disturbance from fire, grazing, or animal impact. Technology. Well, that means we're using a tool of rest. That has results. This is right near the coast in Denmark. If I turned around, there's the ocean. And half of these plants, in between, the short ones are all overgrazed. There's no timing. Every time they grow, they get bitten. And all these others are over-rested plants. And they can't decay fast enough, so they're just dying. That's an example where it's partial rest. Total rest means no disturbance. But many times we have animals in a pasture, but they're too few. They're not timed. There's no recovery, so they're overgrazing. See if you can follow this one. Most pastures are overgrazed, overrested. They have overgrazed plants, overrested plants, and they're understocked all at the same time. Chew on that one a little bit. Examples of rest. Moss in more humid environments, more regular rainfall environments. Living organisms, we talked about that briefly. You know, these fish in the creek, their food chain is actually connected under the stream banks to the food chain of the deer or the elk, the bison or the cow. And they are interconnected, and how we're managing affects one or the other. Grazing and animal impact. The most abused, mainly because we use it to overgraze grasses. We don't move them, we don't allow for recovery, and animal impact. You know, there's a hog wallowing, so it's excessive animal impact. Maybe what we want, and that's where we want it. But still, just realize that's the tool of animal impact being used too far. Except in this case, we decided that's where it would be. To clear out some woods with some hogs, animal impact. But shouldn't they then be moved? Or are you going to turn that into a dirt lot? And many folks grazing hogs outside aren't getting them moved enough for recovery for sure, and that might be okay. I'm going to use poultry or hogs this year to really get this animal impact, and I know I'll overgraze it this year, but I won't do it the next 5 years too. Animal impact can heal a stream bank that's been eroding. that animal impact there is not enough to even break the crust of the soil. It's still on plants, but it is telling you that your stock density is fairly low if you have them have enough time to make trails. I'm throwing a lot at you. Some I'm explaining, other I'm just trying to get through the topic, and I'm on purpose leaving you to think about some things. Here's the key. When you use any of these tools, they have a different result based on the brittleness. And we have some management guidelines. Chris, can you pull that shade just a hair for Martin in front of you? In the holistic management textbook for all these tools, there are some, is that the one? Yeah. There are some guidelines to help know how to manage these tools. If you use fire in brittle areas versus non-brittle, these are some of the results you'll get. If you use technology, same thing. That information's there. It's been learned by people. It's gathered. So let's see. We've talked about ecosystem processes, reading the land, tools on the land, some of the environmental keys we're missing. Let's add the last piece here, just a little bit more detail. Holism, that fourth key. We've got to manage looking at the whole picture. It's very simple, but we have to do it. We're told if you want to really achieve some goals, write them down or be able to really explain them to somebody. Otherwise, they just kind of ramble around here and you never get them done. Managing land, people, and money, you need to have it written down. Who are the decision makers? Who truly makes choices and who just affects them? And we need them, but who makes decisions and who does not at different levels in the farm management. We need to be clear on the resource base we've got. What land do we have? What equipment do we have? We also have to be real clear on what money we have or what can be generated. This is the whole we're managing. So we call it the whole under management. Now, once you know who those decision makers are, it's their job to describe the context. Allan uses a story now. He says, can I light a fire? I'm going to strike a match. Can I light a fire? Yes, no. Don't you need to know a little bit of context? You know, am I going to go have a campfire or am I going to burn the house down? We need a context. The decision makers need to be clear on their context they want to operate within. They need to know the quality of life they want. Your camera's shut off, by the way, which is fine with me. I just noticed it, I almost didn't tell you. The decision makers need to know what is the quality of life they truly want, and that resource base they're managing, what does it have to be like far into the future to sustain them? So we describe it, we map it on the land. This is the landscape, this is how the ecosystem processes need to be working, this is the quality of life we want. That's the context. Then we make decisions toward it. If we don't have that context, we don't know what direction we're going. We don't know where we'll end up. That's the driver to keeping us online.